Did you know that you are wonderfully weird? You've been created to be as unique and one of a kind as your fingerprint, fearfully and wonderfully made, created in the image of God. My name is John Waters, and over the next few minutes, Drake Hunter, senior pastor at Elevating Life Church in Fort Morgan, Colorado, and author of the book Wonderfully Weird, now available through Westbow Press, will help you learn more about your own wonderful weirdness. Now, Wonderfully Weird Living. Welcome back once again to Wonderfully Weird Living. I'm John Waters, your host, and joining me, author, pastor, speaker, life coach, fisherman.
Fisherman.
Yeah, there we go.
I'm on vacation this week.
Drake Hunter. Hello, Drake.
Hello. It's good to be with you, John.
Well, I'm glad you took some time from your vacation to come in and join me this morning. I know that you took one of the young men out of our church yesterday out fishing to show him the ways.
Yeah, actually, ironically, he showed me the way. We went out on the boat, and I was going to, give him this great experience. We caught a couple of fish, but it wasn't, that great. So he says, I'm going to teach you how to shore fish. So he took me to his hot spots, and did we catch fish? Oh, my goodness. So he taught me a thing or two. And it was wonderful because I really don't know much about shore fishing. I'm a boat guy. So he taught me, 15-year-old young man, taught me some things. And wow, as you know, John, I love to learn. I don't care if it's from a 6-year-old or an 86-year-old. So what a great time it was yesterday. Let me personally thank Rain for connecting.
Isn't it interesting what can happen when we put our own egos aside and learn to actively listen to other people, no matter what their social status, their age, or any of that is?
Yeah, being active and listening. Here I have a young man, 15. Now, we think that's young typically in our culture, right? And we kind of, we have this one up, one down mentality. But do you realize, John, if we don't lean into, let's say, that active listening you just mentioned, we miss 15 years of what he's been taught, his relationships, or his experiences. That's a lot of information and knowledge and just good source, if you will, being a good source, that you're missing out on because you have this one up, one down mentality.
Right.
I'm all that in a bag of Doritos, teenagers. No, it's about togetherness, witness, and truly connecting with God and your neighbor, no matter who it is.
Well, unfortunately, in our Western society, it's been drilled into us that children should be seen and not heard.
Yeah, that's right.
Look good.
Yes.
We want you to present a good facade for the people looking at us, but don't say anything. You just be over here and you do whatever I tell you to do. When in fact, as Jesus likes to point out over and over and over again, that, he says, let the little ones come to me. And, God uses the seemingly foolish things of the world to confound the seemingly wise.
That's right. And yeah, you were reading my mind because that's exactly the picture I had in my mind was, that might be our culture, but Jesus paints a whole different experience. And so how wonderful it is to be a Christian that we get to have that mindset of Christ and we can truly think that way rather than how perhaps our culture thinks. And there's good things. I mean, the one thing we don't want to do is project that everything is bad.
Right.
Yeah, and we're not doing that. But, we don't live in denial of the good or the bad. What we do is we live in reality and say, you know what? There's some good ways to think, and that is a very good way to think when it comes to anybody. And that's why I just love enjoying my time with my 7-year-old granddaughter. Well, she'll be 7 in a couple of weeks. And then, of course, Rain, all the way my grandfather. He will beat me for saying that. My father-in-law, who is now 80, just enjoy that time and become an active listener, as well as having the ability to have good conversation and really add value where we can have rhythm together and enjoy life. Because isn't that what it's all about? Enjoy life as we're growing into God's purpose, His plan. That's why we are Christians, so that we can truly become, as I shared already with my son this morning, so that we can become more better together. And so that's that's what life is all about. And if we can learn, understand, if you will, what that is, and just kind of continue to add value in who we are in our relationships, that comes together nicely in the entire experience and in our own realities.
Well, let's take one word, action, which you used as a theme for your message on Sunday, and a few weeks ago we talked about passive listening. So let's talk about the other side of that,
yes,
which is active listening, which is what we've been touching on here this morning. And then I also want to, before we run out of time, talk about action versus just activity, which is kind of passive.
Oh, yes.
And talk about the difference between those.
Can I say activity without movement? How's that?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah, there you
and
go.
we'll describe what that means coming up in a little bit.
Yes.
But let's talk about active listening.
Well, as I've shared, in fact, I believe I did share this on Sunday. For those that are listening, if you weren't there on Sunday, the message was stupid is as stupid does. And I did something pretty silly. I actually did a spontaneous experience in the sense of the message. We took a box of chocolates. My wife actually took the chocolates out of the box with rubber gloves and actually put scriptures on the wrapper, and we closed it back up, and we had the audience actually pick the chocolates. They gave me the verse. I had no idea what it was, and I preached to kind of also indicate what activity was in the sense of the moment when you're not prepared. You got to be spontaneous, but at the same time you have to take action, and that action, the Holy Spirit will use that experience as long as you've done your part.
Well, you were going to say not being prepared, but you are prepared. You've been doing the preparation for years.
30 plus years. It wasn't
right.
just passive living, let's put it that
right.
way. It was very active since 1988 when I became a Christian, to learn and to understand and have focus and to really put things in place. But then the whole point of the experience on Sunday was to show, okay, this is what activity looks like with let's say trust in place, with reality. It is what it is, with that tilt. And I just preached from the heart.
Mm-hmm.
And because I had no time to think about anything. But again, that's going to show your heart that, this guy has put a lot of time and understands what he's talking about,
right.
and
right.
knows how to bring that reality about when it comes to learning something. How do you do it, and how do you apply it to your life? So
and being able to give an answer for your faith.
A lot of fun. So coming back to now active listening, now I was active in that conversation, but we did have some active listeners. We had a great audience on Sunday, and so with that, I'm going to say pretty much everyone was pretty active and leaning into the message on Sunday. It was quite interesting because at Elevating Life Church, we're teaching not only principles, but we're also giving content to whatever that life lesson is or that gist, so that we can truly act in a way that's going to move us forward in our activity. And part of that is being an active listener. Now, one of the things we're going to put in place, we've already talked about, is first and foremost, what is assumed at this point, a reasonable assumption, is what we've already talked about in the past, and that is become a dumb listener. Mm-hmm. And being a dumb listener is having the proper mindset when you approach a conversation with one, or collectively, it doesn't matter. And that just simply means that you believe that you're not the smartest person in the room, and that you're going to be dumb in what they're going to say, because that's the challenge. Oftentimes, we're not listening properly, because what's happening is we're already having a conversation, and we're putting that response together as somebody's talking, and then we're not dumbing our listening. We're just waiting for them to stop so I can say what I need to say, and then that produces a lot of issues. So we've got to become a dumb listener. But with that is what is the content to that listening, active listening aspect? Well, active listening has to do with many things, and we don't have a lot of time, but let me just say, well, first and foremost, active listening, requires, let's say, you leaning into the conversation, non-verbally speaking.
Mm-hmm.
So think about that, folks. If you want to be an active listening, you got to put your phones down. Just like I'm looking, you got to square up with who's part of the conversation. And right now, John and I, we have this setup that we're squarely looking each other, and we're active, we're engaged, we're committed to this. That's part of active listening, isn't it? So that word I'm thinking of is square. You need to square yourself with that person. That's square off. Right. But square yourself so that you're giving them the message that I'm paying attention.
I'm fully engaged.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Then we need to become, let's say, John, open. You need to open yourself up, even non-verbally, right? Non-verbally, we open up and say, okay, I'm here to listen, and I'm not closed off to what you're going to say.
Mm-hmm.
And you can do that many different ways. Another thing is, what would go with that? Again, we're spontaneous this morning. This is coming from...
Well, I know for me, it's all in the eyes.
Yeah,
the other person's eyes.
That's exactly where I was going, John, is eye contact. Now, this depends on culture, though, John. Think about it.
Sure.
You go to certain cultures, you have to be very careful because that is also a sign, and that's a sign of understanding, that making sure you understand where you're at, because there are parts of the world, and as many know, I was in the military, I traveled around the world. So, but in our culture, absolutely, John, you're absolutely right. We have eye contact.
Well, and you can tell by a person's eyes, number one, if they're with you, or if they're confused,
right.
You can see that.
Right.
Or if they're totally disengaged, you can see actually the eyes kind of glaze over. And so you can tell so much just by looking at the eyes.
Right. And emotions go with that too, with the eyebrows,
True.
Right? Mm-hmm. Because with the eyebrows are up, attentive, they're down. My granddaughter and I, we practice all the time. And she's just brilliant with, show me this emotion with your face and your eyes. And she knows how to do it. Show me mad, right? And so, yes, eye contact is it. So we got, you got to square off. That's
square up.
Square up. Yeah, let's use it that way. You got to square up with the person just to let them know that I'm paying attention. Put your phones aside and just say, here, I'm here to listen. We got to open up, eye contact, and let's just round out things by what's another good one, John? I know it sounds like we're just kind of being spontaneous, but look these up. I'm trying to think of there's an acronym out there that we used. It's called SOLAR. That's what it is.
Okay.
Have you heard of that, John?
I haven't.
That's a method of listening. It's part of a negotiator in a police department, military, will use that acronym SOLAR. Mm-hmm. Pretty confident that's what it is. And SOLAR means square. O means open. L means lean into it. Right? E is eyes. R is relaxed.
Square. I just found it here
you just
online.
Found it. There it is.
Square up, open posture, lean in slightly, eye contact or empathy, and respond respectfully.
I knew it was in there somewhere. I got it. Yeah.
There you go.
Did I nail it?
You got it.
Got it. Okay, good. But that's a great lesson, folks. Start using, I guess it'd be a mnemonic, but we call it acronyms in the military. So start using those as triggers because, I need some type of recipe that when I'm learning something to get that in place so I can be active. And that's how you actively listen when you become a dumb listener and you put those two together. And then what happens is you're going to become a very safe person. Can we use that word? For that other person because you care. That says you're safe, you care, and you matter to me.
Well, and as you talked about before, only, I think you said, 6 to 8% of the communication we do is through the words we actually speak.
Yeah, yes.
The rest of it is through the nonverbals, which is what SOLAR is about here. And even simple things like leaning in a little bit says I'm engaged, where
right.
If you think about it, people who are disinterested in what you're saying, what do? They sit back in their chair, they throw their leg up on top of the other leg, cross their arms, all closed off.
Whoops, my arms are crossed.
Yeah. So you can tell so much. And you can imply so much just by your nonverbals without ever saying a word.
Yeah, let me say this too, John. This is important. Our tonality with that. Actually, our nonverbals, that's more habit. But, tonality, you really have to be, you really have to pay attention when you're communicating with your tone. Because tone does communicate emotion. And so that tonality is so important. And we are to really nourish who we are and develop that. And part of that is being aware of our words, but our tone behind that, those words, and also those nonverbals. Now you think about that. When you're working and you're leaning into that and learning what that is, the fruit of the Spirit's going to come out, because that's exactly what we need to do, is put these different methods, if you will, with proper principle in place and lessons, where now we're going to produce fruit. And once that fruit is there, it's going to have the proper, let's say, identity. We'll say that's a word. Have the proper taste or tone to it. And then also non-verbally, you see that it's extremely, you're extremely healthy or not healthy. And so how important it is to begin at the very basic understanding of we're talking about, I'll get my lessons here. We're talking about active listening here. And we have to learn how to listen. Now think about all of your relationships, or we'll call them life roles here. Think about then that relationship with God, with your spouse, or your family, going all the way out to the outer ends of the world. If we can learn to listen and be active in that, with proper response, and that's another conversation, but we'll be on a narrow road, but we'll also be very effective and impactful in our relationship with people, and better yet, in that relationship with God, in that plan and in that reality.
And avoid much conflict, because there won't be as much misunderstanding.
Right, and if the conflict does come, it becomes a more of a disagreement on a wonderful conversation, because you have a safe person in front of you.
Right.
I got your back. I'm not here to belittle you or push you down, or this one up, one down mentality. You become a person that when you receive feedback, as we talk often about this at the church, when you receive, you don't take it personal. You actually go, yeah, let's look at that. I didn't realize I did that. Thanks for telling me, right? So then you become a very caring and safe person. But, let's practice, because just like on Sunday when I preach, it'll come out if, in your different experiences.
Sure.
If you're not practicing, you're not learning or practicing in the sense of meditation and prayer and all of our spiritual disciplines, it's going to come out. You cannot not help whatever your subconscious mind is doing, your heart. And through the tonality and words and nonverbals, we're going to understand your desires. We're going to understand your interests. We're going to understand your motive in a sense, what that is, and we can go on with all of the details of the heart. But you read like a book, and I shared that on Sunday. And that was my whole intention on Sunday, going, I want to be spontaneous, because I want the people that God has put on, I say on the bus that I'm responsible to drive, to truly understand who I am. And I think that came out well on Sunday. I hope it did. And you gave me some just great compliments, and I appreciate that. But that's just to say, okay, this is who I am. You can trust me. Let's do this. Let's create a movement for Christ and then move forward. Well, the same for every human being. You've got to practice, and not practice in just your cave.
Right.
You've got to become opened to truth, to the objective truth, and you have to be, let's say, incremental with that new reality, so that you can develop in a way that's going to be meaningful and significant, and one pebble at a time, as the book of Proverbs implies in the chapter 6 there. So, wow, a lot of information there. So again, let's go back and kind of review those different areas now, since we have that acronym in front of us. Is S is what, John?
Square up.
Square up.
Then open posture.
Open
That's the
posture.
O.
Yep.
L is lean in slightly.
Yep.
E is eye contact or empathy.
Yep.
And then R is
Relax.
respond respectfully.
Oh, I see. I used relax.
Yeah. Respond respectfully.
Yeah, I like mine better. Not that just because sometimes we get so tense, it's like relax, and that will happen. So that's interesting. Yeah, I like. For me, it's for some reason it comes like just relax, man. It's just one experience. Take it easy.
Sure.
We got something to do here. But so say that one again, John. I didn't know that one.
Respond respectfully.
Yeah, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Respond, I guess you can put respond respectfully, that's for the SP, the Lion. Respond responsibly, that's the SJ.
The Ox, yeah.
Respond with some type of efficient problem-solving method, right? Your Eagle. And respond, the NF, with
Emotional.
good emotions,
Yeah.
right? With good tonality. There you go.
There you go. The 4 faces that you find in the book, Wonderfully Weird. I want to transition just a little bit here, Drake, in the time we have remaining, and talk about action from the standpoint of action the way the Western church tends to define it now.
Yeah.
Versus action the way Jesus has called us through the Great Commandment and the Great Commission.
Boy, I'm so glad you mentioned the Great Commandment, because I think I know where you're going here, John, because that is the most significant, most important command, to be with God, and we can say with our neighbor, in the sense of what that command is. Because so many Christians, and you use the word in our culture, in our society, they will quote that commandment to love God with all of your heart. Now, we've talked about this, but we define it, can I say half-baked, to use
Sure.
the
You can
terminology
use
of our culture?
This is your podcast,
in
Drake.
Colorado.
You can use whatever term you want.
To use it'd be a good metaphor where we're at in Colorado.
Sure.
So we're half-baked with it, because we believe, and it's true, you define it in the English language, it says what? It says to be with you. It means to sympathize, to partner, to connect. Versus empathy, which is, you're in the experience and you can come in and out of it. But we are always to sympathize with God and with others. But that's where we stay. And it actually creates a balance, John. Think about a tree, right? When a tree is balanced and you want it to fall, there's no motion, there's no action. Mm-hmm. And so what happens with that definition, that half-baked definition, is you're balanced. Well, balance means there's no motions, there's no motivation, there's no tilt. And so, again, English, so what happens is our culture has leaned into that to in the sense of their own culture, not realize there's another aspect to that one word with. In Hebrew, it means with a tilt. And if you are chopping down a tree and you want it to fall, you need the tilt to be 1%. That's all you need. Mm-hmm. And once you have a slight tilt in your it's pointing in the proper direction, we say the perfect direction of God, and you're with people now with a perfect tilt, it will lean forward. So if you'd go out to Hebrew, you'd see those two words, sympathy and forward. It will always lean or fall in that direction with activity or motion. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. So that most significant command, as Jesus is putting it in place, means to be with, yes, but let's have integrity with the word with the tilt, with motion. If that is not the case, you are a passive Christian. So you're inactive, and you will claim the value system. You will believe with all of your heart, with all of your mind, with all of your soul, but without any action. And we don't have to go out there and look at stats in the sense of those demographic numbers that we can go out and look at. We can just look at our own reality and say, look at all the churches that are passive. They're not leaning into it. There is very little activity, and churches are closing all over the place. Well, if that command is true and we're not doing it properly, for the wages of sin is death, it's guaranteed that those churches are going to die, that they're going to not find breath or the Spirit of God, because the ministry of the Holy Spirit is action, is emotion, the breath of life, activity. So we got to be with God with proper motion, proper tilt, and we got to be with our neighbor in a way that we're going to lean into it, and we have proper actions according to God's active Word of God and His active reality in the sense of nature and history and design. And when we understand that aspect, or when we, not that aspect, when we understand that with integrity, we will conquer the world. All things are possible. Is that what you're looking for, John?
Well, let's bring it down to the individual, and from the standpoint of, let me just play a role here, play a character.
Okay.
Well, Drake, I've been a Christian for 65 years, and I've been a part of this church since I was 5 years old, and I'm very active in the church. Every time the doors are open, I'm inside the church, and I teach a Sunday school class, and I make coffee on Sunday mornings and all that. I'm very active, Drake.
Yes.
But the question then is, but what difference are you making?
Yeah. How effective are you being, and what impact and are you adding value to God's purpose, or are you kind of like that tree that's just standing there, have no fruit, no nothing, and you're not making anything, as I said earlier, more better.
Right.
Because you do want to make yourself more better in who you are, in your character, and how you perform, which is your effectiveness in God's plan. If not, what happens is we get, I say it often, we get stuck in that cave in our culture, what we've been taught, how we deal in our relationships with people and those experiences, and we allow that to be our highest value system in understanding God and who He is, and we become a closed system. And anything that's closed off on itself will eventually die. Well, if that's the case in the sense of the universal laws of God, the ethical laws, and even moral laws, you're not being effective, and you're actually, as I shared on Sunday, being that greasy rag because you're causing more problems than you are adding value to purpose. And the better thing for you to do is just go sit at home and sit on your hands, like I tell once in a while. I've told my granddaughter this once or twice. I remember telling my kids all this time, you're causing more problems. Sit on your hands, because you're not helping. And you have to come to that reality. And that is tough, especially when you've been so ingrained, and you've been oppressed and you're suppressed. I think of the Israelites in Egypt, and you've been so pushed down without realizing it. And so then you are now a very passive person under leadership. The movie that comes to mind is, Feed Me, Seymour. What movie was that? Rocky.
Little Shop of Horrors.
That's what it was. Feed Me, Seymour. And then there is no vision. There is no ought to be. They're just... That is a Pharisaical religious experience, not a spiritual leaning into God's great commandment and commission together, and you missing the mark. Now that's reality. And again, going back to Matthew 7, we can read, Jesus said, I did not know you. And we rationalize, we're going to put up a fit, we're going to do everything going, what do you mean? I opened up a homeless shelter, I fed in the name of Jesus. You were not effective, and there was no fruit in the sense of how God designed it to be. You're in your own little man-made cave, and Jesus said, I knew you not. And that's a reality, and that will cause hell in a very, let me say, in the state that we are now, but that will also project you into the reality of hell, a practical place in eternity. You better understand that God is the designer, and He wants a relationship with you, and He wants you to lean in, and He gives you a choice. You're not a victim. Start thinking about your faith. I appreciate people that have heart. I have a heart. But we got to start thinking about this and quit being so defensive when it comes to our cultures and our ways. Open yourself up, humble yourself, lean into it, and say, I've got to figure this out, because we only have a dash of time. You might have the best life in the sense of resources and all that in the little dash of time. But if your reality is hell, we're here for you. Yeah. Come and talk to us, because we don't want that.
Absolutely. Well, to wrap it up, let's put it in the terms of a song we sing at Elevating Life Church. Rise up and move.
Love it. Yes.
Yeah.
Rise up and move, and not for anything other than being with God and with each other so we can become more better to carry out God's plan, His purpose for us individually and collectively.
Absolutely. Well, Drake, I want to thank you for coming in on your vacation time to do the podcast. And I was going to say you're now officially on vacation, but that's not true either because we have a church business meeting tonight, so you have to be there too.
Yeah, and I have a meeting at 12 and 1. Yeah, I got to talk to the people.
We need to talk about what vacation means.
I take vacations in those 2-hour increments.
Yeah.
Right? So
I guess vacation means you don't have to preach on Sunday. That's
right.
Vacation.
That's right.
Yeah, okay. So anyway, thank you so much, Drake. And certainly want to encourage everyone to get out there and get your copy of Drake's book, Wonderfully Weird. I've finished it now for about the 17th time. And as with all things like that, you glean more and more each time you go through it. And so I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. Well, thank you for reading it for 7 times. I know somebody's reading it.
Yeah. My copy here, if you look at it, I've got it right here in front of me. Look how beat up it is. That's
more beat up than mine.
Yeah, so it's about done for. Anyway, that's going to wrap it up for Wonderfully Weird Living for this week. For Drake Hunter, I'm John Waters, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for joining us this week on Wonderfully Weird Living. Get your own copy of Drake's book, Wonderfully Weird, by logging on to www.wonderfullyweirdliving.com. Also, let us know if you have any questions or comments via our email address, wonderfullyweirdliving@gmail.com. For author and pastor Drake Hunter, I'm John Waters. We'll see you next time.